Brian, you want to?
We are recording.
Or?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't see you.
Yeah, it's right. Okay, if you would like, you can go ahead and mute yourself for now. Okay, great.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Upper Rio Grande Planning Group meeting. Today is February 28, 2022. And for the record, we're starting at 9:06 a.m. At this time, I'd like to hand over the reins of the meeting to Lynette.
Okay, so the first item is going to be public comments. I did not have anybody email me or call to request, but if there's anybody who's watching the presentation right now, if they would like to make, they can do that now. Okay, if there are not any comments, we can to the next item, which is 3. There is one clarification. We have already approved the December 16th, 2022 minutes. I'm so sorry. That's what I'm supposed to take it off. That should not have been on there. So we're only reviewing February 2nd, 2022. So if, and on the backup, I did include both sets of minutes from December of 2021 as well as February, but please disregard the last set of minutes. So we're only looking at February 2nd, 2022.
Any changes, proposed changes to the minutes, corrections, anything?
Motion to approve.
Second.
That was all. So with the first and a second, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
All right, thank you. So agenda item 4 and 5, what we're doing is asking for the full planning group to approve the minutes from the subcommittees. I know that everybody was on these subcommittees at that time, but I believe that this is probably going to be the best avenue for us to have these minutes approved, since we probably will not be meeting in that manner moving forward. So the first set of minutes for approval are for subcommittee 3, and that's from January the 12th, 2022.
Move to approve.
So
Yes.
Second.
okay, first and second, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
All right, the next set of minutes are for subcommittee 2, and that meeting was held on January 27th, 2022. If there aren't any changes, I would ask if there would be consideration for approval on the minutes.
To approve.
Move to approve.
Is that a second, Jeff?
Yes, that sounded like Jeff.
It was Jeff.
Okay.
Okay.
They both said motion to approve, though.
Jeff, do you want to make yours a second?
Sure.
Second.
Whatever.
Thank
There
you.
go.
Okay, the first and second, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Right, motion passes.
Okay, so now we can move on to agenda item 6. Is that correct? Am I on 6 now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so on 6, we do need a new liaison for Region 15 for Lower Rio Grande Regional Planning Group. Sarah Douglas is no longer working with General Land Office, and so we would need for that position to be filled if anyone is interested in serving in that capacity.
And the requirements is tuning in online to view the general meetings, right?
Yes. Yes.
A couple more sentences again about the liaison is you as a Region 14 Upper Rio Grande, you can advocate for Region 14 at the Region 15 meetings, as well as report back to this group here what other things you are seeing in Region 15 about what they're doing that you would like to incorporate, or so on and so forth.
It seems like we're slowing down. We're not going to be having so many committee meetings in the future. Is that correct?
Well,
Anybody?
4 is gonna, these days.
Hey, Ecom, what are you thinking in terms of your level of activity?
I think
Yeah,
if
I
we
think-
had asked, or go ahead.
Well,
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, yeah, compared to, before the new year, I think we are gonna have less meetings, in general, but, we are, yeah, so I would say it is gonna be less than before the beginning of the year. But by how much, I mean, it's kind of tough to say right now. It depends as issues pop up. There might be, additional needs for meetings. But yeah, I'd say in general, it's going to be a little bit slowed down compared to where it was before, just because we're going to have to start developing the documents for reviews. So these next 4 or 5 months will probably be more about reviewing the chapters rather than meeting and coordinating. We'll probably do a lot more individual stakeholder coordination.
It's
But
just the person that would accept this liaison position is just agreeing to attend general meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, just general meetings.
I can give it a
And-
shot if the group likes.
There you go.
Sorry, we're not going to have any subcommittee meetings that way we were having before, right?
Well, there's gonna be a committee 2 meeting, the March 14 to 17. We haven't announced that yet. And I knew subcommittee 4 has got to do all of its work, so.
Well, just for clarification, the meeting that we're looking at for mid-March would be a planning group meeting to focus on subcommittee 2. So we won't be
Yeah,
meeting. Yeah, so,
Subcommittee 2, yeah.
yeah, Isela, I guess to answer your question, yes, we're not going to have it in the same manner that we did before. We're going to have them as planning group meetings because we had a great level of interest for members to participate. So we're going to do it in that manner.
Jeff, if you're interested in doing that, I'll be happy to make a motion to have you do that.
Okay. Yeah, let's give it a shot for 3 months, say.
Okay.
Okay, so you got a motion from Dave.
If you have a second, I'll second. Mr. Bennett, okay, with the first and second, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so for agenda items 7, this is an agenda item that we should have had previously at the first meeting of the year, but we're doing it now. So this is for the election of officers. And so asking for confirmation from the group on nominating your chair, vice chair, and secretary. I did omit 2 at-large members to be included in this as well. So we'll get those on the next planning group meeting in March. And so currently your chair is Omar Martinez, your vice chair is Jeff Bennett, and your secretary is Javier Acosta.
Do any of the current officers have issues where they could not continue?
I don't.
No, this time. I will say, if anybody's interested in becoming chair, I'd be happy to relinquish the position to you.
You do great as chair, so I think you should continue.
I'll make a motion, since nobody said anything, I'll make a motion to have the current officers continue.
I'll second that.
Second.
If that was Levi. Yeah, okay. So we have a motion from Dave.
As long as that works for you. I should.
With the first and second, any further discussion? Last chance. Anybody? Please. Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Did
Thank
we
you.
have an abstain here?
All right, so the next agenda item, this is requesting approval for expenses, administrative expenses that we will submit to Texas Water Development Board. And on this document here, this is only representing costs for Rio Grande Council governments. Last meeting, we were presenting costs for AECOM. And so what we're asking for is for approval to submit expenses equaling up to $13,266.39. That's representing the first quarter of our fiscal year from October 2021 to December 2021. And these costs represent salaries, benefits, and other costs, which are our rent, telephone, maintenance, things of that nature. Are there any questions for me pertaining to these expenses?
Under year-to-date budget, the bottom number, 18109, what is that actual number? Is that
It's,
181.09 or
18,109.
18,109? Okay. All right. I
P4C,
assumed it was based on the total, but I
Yes.
thought I'd ask.
Just in case.
foresee any issues with your budget?
No, I think we're at a higher rate this fiscal year and we should be, I'm assuming, and so we'll have to confirm with AECOM, our frequency may not be as great as it was in fiscal year 23. And so my time will be less at that point, but what we'll do is we will incorporate the additional costs, the additional funds that were received. And so that has not been included in this budget as of yet.
You need a motion, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
I'll entertain a motion.
Somebody.
Move to approve.
Yes, sir.
Second.
With the first, any second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, motion passes.
So then moving on to our next agenda item, which is not showing up anymore. Let's see. That's interesting.
Try,
Let me refresh. And expand it.
that's interesting.
Okay, it's coming one at a time. All right, so we'll take number 9. This is for the vacancies. We do have, we have 2 submissions. And the first one is for generating utilities. And Ken Martin is with the El Paso Electric Company. And so he submitted his nomination for consideration. And then as we move down, the next individual, and I never say doctor's name correctly.
Zuping Shing.
Zuping Sheng. And so Dr. Sheng, he's familiar with water planning for sure. He was with our group for quite some time. And so representing the interests of agriculture. So I think that he'd be a really great fit for flood planning as well. And so his resume was attached as well. So those are these 2 positions, if you all were to accept these nominations, would make our list almost full. The only one that we would still be missing, which we won't to get, is the flood districts, but we still have it. So we will be nearly 100% complete with our membership if you all decide to go forward with these 2 positions.
I'm sorry, do
Any
we have to
questions?
choose, are we choosing between these 2 people for one position?
No. The first one, Mr. Martin, would be for electric utilities.
Okay.
And then Dr. Shank will be for agriculture.
Is
So-
Zuping still with AgriLife?
No, he is no longer with AgriLife. He's serving as a now.
Okay.
Looks like he's
I'm
got his
happy
own
with both
company.
those people.
I'm sorry, sir?
I said, I'm happy with both those people.
Are you
Can we
happy?
count-
And then,
Can we count that as a
I'd make a
motion?
motion to approve, I guess.
We
I
need a second.
that.
Okay.
okay, so let's make sure we've got, okay, so we have Dave, we have Jeff and Lucinda. Okay,
Person second. Any further discussion? These are great people.
Oh, yeah. I'll say,
All right. All in
excellent.
favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Welcome to both Martin and Dr. Singh.
all right. Okay, and I will inform them of that decision and bring them on board for the next meeting that we have in mid-March. So the next agenda item will be updates from Richard Bagans. So I'll turn that over to Richard.
Hi, everyone. This is Richard Bagans with the Water Development Board. I have several updates this morning. So for the tech memorandum, there were several deliverables that were given an extension for the March 7th deadline, mostly GIS deliverables. So you all will be voting on to approve those at this meeting. The tech memo deliverables that were submitted by your consultants in January are currently going under heavy intensive content review at the board right now. And we are looking to present what we're considering informal comments to you all and your consultants around late April, which will be more so suggestions on how to make your plan better, or like, we found a discrepancy here. Make sure you guys check all of these to make sure that they're all correct. So they're just going to be largely suggestions come April to make sure all the data is good, clean, and verified. The contract amendments, so the additional funding from the legislature for the additional tasks 11, 12, and 13 to perform the studies, that is currently in DocuSign right now, waiting on a few more TWDB staff members to sign, and then it will go to Annette to sign to execute with Rio Grande Council. Once that executes, then you all can choose to amend your subcontracts accordingly to then get started on tasks 11, 12, and 13, which will all, again, wrap up into an amended flood plan next July. So that should execute soon. In terms of payment requests, TWDB, we're processing payment requests, but we are on a little bit of a slower backlog. So we are working with Annette and Gilbert's team to process some of the payment requests to get expenses paid. There is a technical consultants conference call this afternoon. We're starting to have around quarterly technical consultants conference calls and quarterly chairs conference calls. So this afternoon, we have a couple of topics to discuss with the technical consultants. And then there's a chairs conference call on this Wednesday for all the chairs of the regions to discuss what's been going on. I do want to give a shout out to your consultant team because they've been submitting a lot of questions to us and we've been trying to get them answers. So your consultant team has been very active and asking a lot of good questions. And a little side note too, I was at a wedding this weekend and I met somebody from Tiff's Treats in Austin who is also working with Barracuda PR, and they are also having success with your PR team. So also giving a shout out for all of your public open house meetings, etc. So, and that's all the updates for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I believe the next set of agenda items will be for AECOM. So if you want to take over the screen.
There we go.
All right.
So move it.
Can everyone see the
Good time.
screen?
Yes, Brian.
Great. Thank you for everyone for joining, and good morning. And Richard, thanks for the feedback. It was great to hear. So I guess the first thing we had this morning is a just quick update on the PECOS and Presidio open house meeting updates. And for that, we have Patricia online from Barracuda to walk through that.
Hi, good morning. Yes, so we met at PECOS, Odessa College PECOS Center on February 9th. I guess we can move to the next slide. So it doesn't look like a ton of people, but we really did get some really quality people. We had 5 people sign in for the PECOS meeting. On average, we saved about an hour to 1.5 hours. So they really conversed with us. They gave a lot of really good and useful inputs. And most of the respondents that did fill out the comment cards indicated they were concerned about safety issues related to the flooding. And of those who had been affected by flooding in the last 5 years, they sustained about $10,000 to $20,000 of flood-related damage to their business or property. Again, we had 3 people who completed their comment cards, but I think mostly what they did provide was a lot of input on, the maps that we had there. Next slide. We did receive a lot of media coverage, although no reporters attended the meeting. We did receive pre-coverage from Odessa American. They were really helpful in writing articles, not just for this meeting, but before this as well. And then KWES also did an interview and wrote about the meeting. And there's just a couple of the photos that we have. Then Presidio, the next day we had the meeting in Presidio on February 10th. That was at the Presidio Activity Center, which turned out to be a really great venue for us. So we can go to the next slide. 8 people signed in for that meeting, and they also stayed about an hour to 1.5 hours, which again provided really good feedback for us. I think Alejandra was able to get the information in real time from them. And we had 5 people complete their comment cards, and most indicated that they hadn't been directly affected by flood damage, but their commute had been interrupted by flooding. So those who did indicate flood damage, the costs were $10,000 or below. And then we had a reporter there, Sam Karras from Big Bend Sentinel. I searched for the article, but I didn't see anything. So once I can find that, I'll go ahead and send that to you all. But we also, again, received press from the Odessa American and KWES. And again, some photos from the meeting. And there's Sam interviewing some of the folks. That's all I have.
Great, thanks, Patricia. Does anyone have any
Just a
questions on?
Yeah, are there going to be some follow-up articles that we motivate into those local papers in those locations?
Yes, that was the hope, that with Sam being there and hopefully, people seeing and understanding really what this was, we are hoping that there were some follow-up. And we can also reach out to the stations and the newspapers and see if they plan anything further as well.
Yeah, I guess I'd ask if there are any follow-up articles, that there be a link in there or something where if they didn't know about the meeting and wanted to provide some input, they could.
Absolutely. And we are also still running ads on social media. So Facebook, we have ads that will be running, I believe, until April.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I put a link to Sam's article in the chat.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And just to give everyone a heads up, our next public meeting will be likely around the May timeframe, which will be our scheduled wrap-up meeting in El Paso for the flood plan prior to submitting the draft RFP later this summer. So look ahead for those, and we'll start to coordinate logistics on that meeting. All right, so most the next topic and closest up on the schedule is the submittal of the tech memo deliverables that Richard mentioned. Those are due next Monday, and so we're going to give an overview of what that will include, a demonstration of a few of those main components of the deliverables, and we'll have an action to vote later on to authorize the submittal of those deliverables to the Water Development Board. So the primary components of next week's submittal are GIS files associated with task 2, including existing and future condition flood risk data. That's flood hazard areas, flood hazard gaps, and flood prone areas, which are community provided, and other areas that may not be represented in the typical flood hazard layer. And then we have flood exposure and vulnerability layers. And all of these data sets will be available for the existing conditions and future conditions. And we'll discuss more in a few slides what some of the assumptions were for our future condition analysis. So I will note that the geodatabase contains very large GIS files, so the data can be made available for review upon request if you'd like to take a look, but just note that it will require GIS software, and the data transfer is quite large. So we didn't want to post that online just for accessibility reasons, but it is available for review upon request. Also, we have several associated maps that will be delivered next week. The main ones are highlighted in blue here that we're going to be showing in a few slides, in the next few slides. And then we will be providing copies of all the PDFs to the planning group once everything is finalized. So just to go through some of these maps and give you an idea of what information they'll be showing. This is our existing condition flood hazard map. For El Paso County, we're utilizing primarily the preliminary FEMA 2D floodplain data from 2019 that's currently in I believe it's in the approval or appeal process. So that covers most of the county along the Rio Grande and within the city boundaries, as well as part of the county outside of the city. It does not include Fort Bliss, though. So what we did for Fort Bliss is we brought in Fathom, the 1% and 0.2% to cover the Fort Bliss area. And the El Paso, the FEMA floodplain also covers 1% and 0.2%. On the other side of the region, we have some new data, relatively new data from approximate FEMA floodplains for the counties of Ector and up here, and then the county of Valverde down here. So those were used for the 1%. And then we also used region-wide, except for those 3 counties, we used the FAFDS layer, which it contains digitized floodplain data from typically around the 70s or 80s. There were hard maps that were digitized. So those are the oldest available maps, but they do cover a wide area and do provide some good information. A couple of those areas are down in Presidio. FEFDS shows some floodplain data, some floodplain information that doesn't show up in the Fathom. So we use the FAFDS, or we used it all over, but it's very critical there. And then we also noted that FAFDS is critical over here between Hudspeth and Culberson, where the salt basin creates a playa type flood risk, which includes Del City and Van Horn. So those areas of flooding don't show up as prominently in Fathom, and so FAFDS is really helpful over there as well. So then region-wide, we did, outside of El Paso County, we included Fathom, both the 1% and 0.2%, and unioned them all together. And so the data set will include attributes specifying the source that the floodplain came from, as well as the frequency of the specific floodplain in each area. So then moving to map 5, this is a high-level overview of the gaps that we're noting for floodplain data in the region. The beige color are the areas of the FAFDS layer where that was used. And if we look closely, each of these counties will have the date label of when the floodplain was made effective. So there's one from 1977, and then the rest are from mid-80s. So that beige color shows the FAFDS layer, while the light red shows areas where there's no available FEMA mapping. And so both of the beige and the light red areas we're considering gaps. The beige we're considering a gap because the FAFDS is quite old and could be updated if desired. And then the light red, where there's no data FEMA mapping at all, that's of course a gap as well. So the only areas that we did not count as a gap are the areas of El Paso County, Valverde, and Ector, where there's relatively new FEMA mapping, and so we don't necessarily think that additional mapping would be beneficial at this time, at least. So that's for the existing condition flood hazard gaps. Then for the flood exposure, this one's a little bit difficult to read within the presentation due to the resolution, and the data points are very small, but this shows the at-risk buildings, roadway segments, and agricultural land symbolized by different crop types. We'll also be adding roadway crossings to this map later this week before we submit to the development board. So when we send the actual PDF to the group, you'll be able to see more clearly the different crop types throughout the region. Then existing condition vulnerability and critical infrastructure. This is very similar to the exposure, but we're focusing here on the most critical parts of the exposure areas. So for roadway segments, we're looking at the most critical interstate, freeway, expressway, and principal arterial segments. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay,
On
sure.
the existing conditions, here in El Paso, the firm maps the SFHA is under review and it's under appeal right now. So if there's any changes to that modeling done by FEMA, is that going to be reflected on your study?
Well, it will depend on, I think at this point, it likely will not be included in the first round of the study results. But depending on when the revisions are finalized, it might be included in part of the amendment that could take place later this year.
Okay, so just make sure you check with FEMA so that we can include the latest models.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely. All right. In this vulnerability map, we also are showing buildings scaled with the symbols scaled by color for the social vulnerability index. That will give you an idea of the areas that are considered most vulnerable to flooding and where those key vulnerabilities are located. We have critical infrastructure shown here. We may be making some slight modifications to this before submitting to TWDB, but overall, we do have a lot of good results here. So then for a future condition flood hazard map, this one's, our methodology was a little different compared to the existing conditions. For El Paso County, we actually reran the FEMA models based on to account for future precipitation and future land use projections. Those projections were the land use projections came from the El Paso MPO, and the future precipitation adjustment was based on a report that was provided by the Water Development Board and developed by the state forgetting the name at the moment. Sorry.
Did you consider Atlas 14 for this?
So Atlas 14 is considered existing conditions, not future conditions. So this it is included in the preliminary FEMA mapping. So as a base for the existing conditions, it is, and then for the future conditions, we applied an adjustment on top of that, which was about 20% increase, I believe. So that was just for El Paso County, and for Fort Bliss area, and actually outside of a little bit outside of El Paso County, inside Hudspeth County, we're also sort of this is sort of the watershed boundary that we ran the future condition analysis for. So we did include it for Fort Bliss. Outside of that area, we're actually using the existing condition flood hazard data for the most part across the region, with the idea that outside of developed areas, there's not going to be a lot of development or any significant changes to the hydrology. For precipitation, the precipitation study was also less conclusive out in this part of the state. So for the most part, the rest of the region remains the same. However, we did make modifications within developed areas, shown here in pink boundaries, sort of like in these areas. We applied a buffer for those areas based on the population increase or the estimated population increase from the Water Development Board water planning population, as well as the state demographer. And so we buffered the areas, and then we sort of applied a higher storm event as a proxy for the existing as a proxy for future conditions. So as an example, for the future condition 1%, within those areas we applied the existing conditions 0.2%. Similarly, for the future condition 0.2%, we applied the existing conditions 0.1%, or the 1,000-year flood event. And that was that 1,000-year flood event that came from the draft Fathom data provided back in July, I believe. And I should also note that we were only making these changes for the pluvial flooding and not the fluvial, with the idea that the pluvial is more likely to represent increases in development as associated with the city development and runoff from the localized flooding, whereas at the fluvial level, that's controlled more at a larger watershed scale, and those conditions are not likely to change at that large scale. And so the fluvial was not changed, but the pluvial was adjusted using that method. So that gives you an idea of the future conditions. Flood hazard layer for the gaps, we pretty much noted a gap everywhere in the region except for that area around El Paso County with the El Paso County watershed. All the other areas, the assumptions that were made were very high level and could still be considered a data gap, just since we didn't apply specific land use or precipitation projections to these other areas. So with that, I guess open up for any other questions. Yeah, Chris.
This is Chris. I know you were presenting, so you didn't notice some of the chats, but there were a few differences in the presentation materials versus the maps in the presentation today, and some of the members are just noticing those, and I thought we could maybe touch on what some of those differences were. I know that we've continued to refine these maps over the weekend, and they are a work in progress. So if you wanted to maybe just touch on some of the refinements that we've made, you know, as in these most recent maps versus the ones sent out last week.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I forgot to mention that at the start, but yeah, we will provide an updated copy of the materials after this meeting. But the changes were very, very minor. So we made some corrections to the legends up in El Paso, or actually across the region. The city town layer was on top of the floodplains, kind of hiding the floodplain from view. So we fixed that within the maps. We had a little bit more detail here on the legend with respect to map 5, showing the differences in the gaps between the beige and light red areas. For the agricultural map, we differentiated between the different crop types, whereas before it was just showing all crops everywhere. And I think this map, we may have made some adjustments to the vulnerability index, color scheme, future conditions. I think the same change that I discussed before with respect to the city and town layer position, we fixed that. So overall, they were just minor cosmetic changes just to make the maps more readable. And again, once in the versions that we send out to the group, the PDFs, they'll be the same versions that we send to the development board. So and they'll be in PDF format.
That comment was for me, and maybe if we're going to get updated slides, then I'm fine.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Brian, is the GIS data posted anywhere?
It is not posted, and that's our idea was to just make it available upon request. If we want to post it, we might be able to we would probably have to look into how to upload it to a file share system and provide a link to you all for posting, because it's not, the data sets will be like probably 1 to 2 gigabytes or greater. So if that's something that you want us to look into, we could do that. Otherwise, our suggestion was just to make it available upon request for anyone. But if that's something that you want us to look into, we can do that.
Can you make it available to, please?
Okay, sure.
I
Okay,
think
thanks.
Stella had the question.
Yes, Brian, can you make it web-based? That way those that don't have GIS can still access the file.
That's more work that probably don't have
He provided.
the ability to do at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we're sort of making it available upon request, just so that those who may not have access to GIS or not, the thought was that the maps would serve as the material that is more accessible for people, and then if needed or desired, we can certainly provide the larger, more detailed GIS information, but it's going to be potentially cumbersome if the person is not familiar with GIS or just is not familiar with working with large data sets.
All right. Thank you.
And just to clarify, I think the PDFs that we're planning on sending out are high resolution, right? So you should be able to zoom in pretty close to those. Is that right, Brian?
They're a little high resolution. I mean, there will be limitations in terms of what you can, I'll show an example here.
Yeah, I think if you were to actually print these things out, what are they, 22 by 34 right now? Remember the size?
Some of them are 11 by 17 and some of them are 36 by 48.
So some of these big ones, depending on the resolution, take a really long time to export. So that's why there's kind of a balance between the highest resolution possible and what's, I guess, reasonable for this sort of draft review.
Brian,
ahead,
I think we have to provide the ability for them to review this in detail if they want to. So I think we have to come up with a solution to that and then send it out to the group. We have to be able to do it. So we'll talk about it after this meeting and figure out how we're going to respond, but we have to do it somehow.
Right. Well, yeah, so we can certainly provide the digital data for those who want to review it. And this is the resolution of the maps, which you can see is a little pixelated when you zoom in. It doesn't provide like a great amount of detail, so you're not going to be able to see individual roads or affected communities.
Let's talk about it after the meeting, and we'll resolve and send out an email to everybody.
Okay.
Bell has a question.
Sure.
Yes, this is more of a general question. I know through our meetings, we had voted that this mapping will be done basically with the same assumptions that FEMA has done, levies non-existence. But we all know that the IBWC and the county and the city are all working on getting those levies certified. And once they are certified, a lot of these areas will be hopefully lifted from being flood prone by FEMA maps. How soon, or what is the process that we will follow that will update the maps by the development board, by the Texas Water Development Board?
So in the short term, I believe what we're planning to do, and Chris, feel free to add or clarify, but for that particular case of incorporating the levees and accounting for the flood protection, we do have some flood management or flood mitigation projects proposed. And as part of evaluating those FMPs, we will be accounting for the flood protection and accounting for the benefits to those. In terms of updating maps, the maps that we're providing to the Water Development Board are not regulatory, so they don't have any bearing on the insurance requirements from FEMA. But in terms of like updating actual risk, in terms of updating the estimated risk from as a baseline condition, that would occur later down the road with respect to amendments or in future planning cycles, depending on what is which levies are accredited. So the baseline risk maps would be done sort of in tandem with FEMA's process, but none of these maps will be used for insurance or FEMA purposes. This is all for high-level planning at the state level for identifying projects.
And I'll just chime in that we have been coordinating with the IBWC about, and that's something I'll talk a little bit about when we get to the FMEs and FMS's portion of this presentation. But we are trying to set up a meeting with IBWC to talk about what are the next segments of levies that are going to be ready for accreditation to help move that process along. But yeah, as Brian was saying, first they have to get certified, and then as the maps are approved by FEMA based on interior drainage studies and a review of that process, which is, it's not a quick process. So I don't think it's likely that those maps will get updated during this cycle. It might be possible that certain segments that become certified will get updated in the amendment phase, but again, that's just depending on the timing of the whole process and how soon we can get those segments certified. But we are aware that it's a very high priority, and that's why we've created an FME for it, and that's why we're working with IBWC to expedite that process as much as we can.
Thank you, Chris. One last just follow-up question on that, since you've mentioned that those maps will not be used for any type of insurance rating, but will there be any chance that local counties or cities might rely on these maps to assess flood risk? In the absence, let's say if FEMA maps get adjusted and these maps are not going to be adjusted soon after that, will the local county, like this question might be for Gilbert or someone that works at the city, will they look at those maps and come to a developer and say, you know what, yes, FEMA maps don't show it, but the Texas Water Development Board still shows this area as a risk prone for flooding? Could that happen?
Well, I think that anybody could look at those maps, and depending on where FEMA is in the process and where we are in this flood planning cycle, yes, there will be a lag in if they bring up those maps at a time when the FEMA maps are certified and our maps are not yet updated, then they could certainly ask that question. But our response would be that there are studies available in floodplains public information that show what the risk is with the levees in place, such as interior drainage projects, interior drainage plans, and there. So we would probably point them to those maps and say, well, here's what the and also the FEMA should be updated based on those. So they'll be available, but it's just a matter of timing. We can't update our maps as soon as the FEMA becomes certified, but we're definitely aware that that's a priority. And so wherever we are in the mapping process, we'll try to be up to speed on the progress from FEMA and the certification process and update them as quickly as we can.
So I just want to interrupt for a second and say this is really part of Task 8, which we're going to discuss at the end of this meeting. Task 8 addresses part of that, so we'll bring it up again pretty quickly.
Looks like we have another hand up. Does that answer your question, Sal?
Yes, thank you, guys. Thank you for the most part, and we'll discuss it again in task 8. Thank you.
Chris, there
All right,
was
looks like-
a Levi question, and then
Yeah.
also, just real quick, after Levi, James Weaver put in the chat that he didn't see there was, Port Davis noted in the city town layer, so we'll go with Levi first.
Would it be possible to get an overlay from the modeled future conditions and over the existing conditions to kind of see the difference of those two maps?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So
we-
that is one of the maps that will be provided.
Oh,
We
okay.
don't have it shown here, but they'll have both of those layers on top of one another.
Okay. And then real quick, and I know this might be going back a little bit, but you mentioned that there was an assumption for modeling that future development, sort of a proxy in the developed areas. You're just modeling a higher storm frequency there, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we buffered the developed areas, so it's slightly, the areas were slightly larger than the current limits of the development, but we focused on those specific areas.
Okay.
Yeah, that was based on assuming future development within those developed areas already, since there's so many large regions of large portions of our region that are undeveloped and that will likely stay undeveloped in the future. And the future precipitation data is very limited as far as how the climate might change in this region. So we didn't really adjust it for precipitation increase, but just for development increase around the existing cities. However, and I think Brian already mentioned it, but in El Paso, we did have some research that showed a pretty clear trend of increased rainfall expected in the El Paso County area. And we also had the detailed preliminary FEMA models. So that's why we increased the precipitation based on that research available in El Paso County, as well as utilized the detailed future development plans. So El Paso was a little bit different than the rest of the region based on the expected precipitation increases and the increased information available on future development.
So in modeling, particular in this, situation, it's easier for you to adjust the rainfall or precipitation rather than just increase your land uses. I'm assuming.
Well,
so for the developed areas, you're doing a buffer to model, an increase in developed area. It's easier to increase your precipitation rather than model like a physical change in land use, correct? Is that why you're doing that rather than just more, developed areas?
No, it's not really about the ease. I mean, there's a balance between what information is available and how confident we are in making some of these adjustments. Now, like I said, in El Paso, from the future climate change information, there was a clear trend that they are expecting increased rainfall in El Paso. And there's a map we can point y'all to if you're interested. We can follow up and have a meeting about it, separate meeting. But there's a map of expected changes in rainfall. And if you look at El Paso, it's all one color. If you look at the rest of our region, it's kind of scattered, and so it just shows a lot of uncertainty and a lot of variability. So we didn't want to go ahead and just assume that the whole region is going to experience increased rainfall. In fact, some of it might experience decreased rainfall. However, we also don't want to make a blanket assumption that the whole region is going to be developed one day, because there are very remote areas of development. So we made the decision that based on the modeling information that we had, we could make this simplified assumption around developed areas outside of El Paso County that they might develop a certain percentage in the future, and that certain percentage was based on population projections for those specific counties. So that buffer around each city is based on a increased population projection in the counties those cities are within. So those buffers vary, and that's how we assume the future land use would change. but we didn't make any changes to the future precipitation.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
and we also we did account for future land use changes within El Paso County. So that was a very critical part of our El Paso County modeling.
Yeah, we had the detailed models, and we had the future land use, detailed future land use maps in El Paso. So we had a different approach in El Paso where that information was available.
Right. Okay, so, oh, and to the question about Fort Davis, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We'll have to double check that our layers are showing properly. Not sure why that's not showing up here. We might be
Because
just pointing to the wrong.
It's not a municipality.
Oh, right. Okay, so yeah, we need to add in the CDPs, census designated places or unincorporated areas. So we'll go ahead and add that to the map for our submittal next week. All right, thank you. If no other questions, I guess we'll ask for a vote at this time for authorization to submit once, including all those, including that modification that we just mentioned, as well as those additional maps.
Brian, just real quick, did you all, I'm sorry I missed it, but did you all answer James' question?
About
James Weaver had a chat about Fort Davis.
Fort Davis, yes, that was those areas were included in the analysis, but just it doesn't show up here on our map because we'll fix that layer just to make sure that all the unincorporated areas are showing up properly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this time, I entertain a motion to authorize AECOM to submit a completed draft of deliverables to the Texas Water Development Board.
Second.
To approve.
Second before the motion. I think we need a second after the motion.
Second.
There we
I guess
go.
that was the second.
Okay, can you who made the motion?
Yeah, he said.
Okay.
It was the first, Sal. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody?
By the
Alright,
way, I
motion
did
passed.
not, second.
You did, he didn't second.
Oh, then
It
who? I'm
was
sorry.
somebody else that did, for the record.
Rodriguez.
Can you? Who was it that seconded?
Rodriguez.
Oh,
Okay, real quick, I'm so sorry just to confirm, Mr. Rodriguez, are you on the screen? Because we need to have you on camera.
Yes.
Can anybody see? I can't see you on here. But if anybody else can, then that would be okay.
I can.
Yeah.
Yes,
There he
okay,
is.
oh, there you are. There you are. Thank you, sir. Okay, so, okay, Rodriguez made the second. Okay,
yes. Sorry, Mr. Masood.
He said it's okay, but he didn't unmute.
okay. All
There
right,
you go. All right. We got it. Thumb up signals.
Okay. So then, does AECOM need anything else in terms of voting?
No,
I don't
I
believe so.
think that's the approval. Yeah, that we needed basically to submit by the deliverable deadline of March 7th. And you know, as Jeff was mentioning, we are going to meet internally after this and just find the best way to deliver whatever geodatabase or maps, if any of y'all are interested in reviewing a particular part of this deliverable. We're going to be continuing to make progress up until the due date of the deliverable. So things are going to change throughout the week, but at any point in time, if you all would like to just a snapshot of where we are, if there's a particular deliverable that you would like to see, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll find a way to get it to you. We know we can send anything through WeTransfer up to any size, but I don't know if there are restrictions with sending it through that software. Annette, I don't know if you're able to comment on that.
Well, on our side, we have a firewall where we can't get the WeTransfer. It doesn't mean that we can't eventually. I just need to check and see with our vendor why that's happening, what needs to be corrected. But I don't know if we send out in the group email, if we send that hyperlink, maybe the others will have that opportunity to use it as well. So I would think that would be the case, because I think the workaround I did last time was actually downloaded it to my personal phone and it worked that way. So how about I just work on it on my end so I can send it out, and if I need it available for the others, I can make that for them as well.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you all.
Okay, so then we're moving on to item number 13.
Right. So this is the part of this meeting where we're going to talk about FMEs and FMSs. We used to have a subcommittee 3 focused on this portion of the deliverables. Now we are moving away from subcommittees and just having these be integrated into the general RFPG meeting. So that's why we're talking about it here today. And again, Annette mentioned that was due to some restrictions related to not being able to have a quorum outside of these general RFPG meetings. So that's why we're talking about them in the general meetings now. But the general topics we wanted to cover related to this former subcommittee 3 are just give you a general progress update. There's a lot of good information we've received that we'll go over, and a lot of things that we're working on. We wanted to give you all a glimpse of the updated list of FMEs and FMSs. This won't be the full list that we'll show you, but just the changes to the list based on some of the updates that we talked about in the last subcommittee 3 meeting. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about how we are going to incorporate FMPs that are not evaluated in this cycle as FMPs. For example, stormwater master plan projects that weren't in the highest priorities for El Paso County or the city of El Paso. Those were in the lower tiers 2, 3, and 4. We're going to talk about how we might incorporate those as FMEs or possibly FMSs, because we did receive some information from TWDB answering some of our questions about that subject. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So as far as the general progress, we have been coordinating with USIBWC. We've been trying to set up a meeting with some of their staff that are familiar with the levy projects, and we have submitted a list of specific questions regarding the timing of when when certain projects will be ready for accreditation. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we are coordinating with Delbert. He's been very responsive and keeping us up to date on the progress. And we appreciate your help, Delbert, coordinating with your organization, with USIBWC. And what we're expecting right now is a email response to our questions by the end of this month, which is, I guess, today. So I don't know, Delbert, if you have any updates, if we could still expect that sometime this week. the IBWC preferred to respond through email rather than a meeting at this time, but that doesn't, from what I understand, that doesn't mean we can't meet at a later time. But yeah, Delbert, anything to add on your end?
Delbert was not going to be joining us today because he had to go to Amistad.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, like I said, he's been continuing to, to coordinate internally with USIBWC and has been keeping us up to date. So hopefully we will eventually get a meeting set up, but we're looking forward to getting some responses to the questions we submitted. I think Dr. Bora is here today from USIBWC. I don't know, anything to add, Dr. Bora, from your end?
No, I don't have anything except only regarding that Sunland Park West levy. So pretty soon we'll submit it to FEMA for certification, Sunland Park West.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. Well, just reach out to us if you have anything that is related to the interior drainage analysis or any questions about that. Feel free to don't hesitate if there's anything that we can help push that along or facilitate with you all.
Yeah, USIBWC, we don't have any jurisdiction beyond the toe of the levy. So the county, I think you guys already completed that. The interior drainage on the west side of Sunland Park, that area.
Right. Yeah, that should be incorporated in the interior drainage study. But yeah, we can follow up and we'll look at that specific levy segment and let you know if there's anything to report on that. But yeah, it should all be there in the interior drainage study for the county.
And you guys are the, I think, lead consultant, right, for El Paso Water? As soon as we'll submit those documents to FEMA, so we'll also submit it to El Paso Water, then you can resubmit along with your interior drainage for accreditation.
Okay, great. Yeah, we are a consultant for EP Water. I don't know, Isela, if you have any comments on that process, but yeah, we're happy to, anything we can do to help facilitate this process, we will do.
Yes, we have to look at the contracting mechanisms that we have in place. But since ACAM has helped us with the other accreditation before, that's we definitely want them on board. But that's something that I need to check internally before we proceed with that route.
All right. Thank you all. The next bullet here we have is we did coordinate with Samuel Solis from the UC Davis. He is doing a study of the Pecos River watershed. He's also within that same study looking at the Rio Grande watersheds, both outside of Texas and in Texas. And we had a really good conversation with him about some of the data that he's using, and we're hoping to get a copy of the report that he's working on with his graduate students. I think they're planning on wrapping up their dissertation by the end of this semester. So I think around the May timeframe or so, that should be coming out, and that'll be a lot of useful work that they've been doing. So we wanted to get up to speed, and we also since we've been coordinating with other entities like the Army Corps of Engineers, we made sure and put him in touch with the folks at the Army Corps of Engineers that are working also on a hydrologic and hydraulic model of the Pecos River. And so hopefully they'll be coordinating and sharing information. And that was, that's part of what we're trying to do here in this effort is facilitate communication and coordination between different entities, so everyone knows what everyone else is working on. we don't want anyone reinventing the wheel. So it was, I thought, a pretty successful meeting that we had on February 2nd with Samuel. We've been coordinating with TxDOT. We did get a meeting set up last week on the 24th of February, and we talked about the 2 FMPs that will be including as flood mitigation projects in the regional flood plan, SH20 from Donovan to Texas Avenue, and FM 170 from Candelaria to FM 160, or basically the Presidio area. I'm sorry, US 67 slash the Presidio area. So those are 2 projects we discussed, and we also discussed any other projects that we thought might be good for consideration in this plan, which we'll list out some of those on one of the next slides, some of the other TxDOT projects. But overall, it was a good coordination meeting. And, he said that in general, we talked with Tony Antonio Santana from the El Paso district of TxDOT, and he was saying that typically they don't apply for state grant programs. They have applied for federal ones. We did send him the information on the flood infrastructure fund so that he could follow up and just confirm, if that was something that they might apply for one day in the future, because as we've talked about here in several meetings, the projects that get in the plan are going to be the ones that are eligible for future state funding. And so, since there are so many projects out there, we're trying to prioritize which ones to include in there. And so, we also brought it up with Texas Water Development Board, whether TxDOT and the USIBWC are entities where their projects might be appropriate to include in this plan. And their response was absolutely, that they do, would like to see all flood mitigation or floodplain management related projects included in the plan, regardless of, of the process for funding them, whether that's in place or not. They would like to see as much of that in the plan as possible. So we are still planning on including those at this time. Any questions related to that? TxDOT or IBWC projects being in the plan? Excuse me. All right. We also conducted a coordination meeting with Jeff Bennett and Philip Boyd, who I believe is his proxy, Jeff's proxy, in case he can't attend certain meetings. We talked on the January 20th and on February 23rd about potential FMEs and FMSs on the Mims Unit Ranch, which is just northwest of Marfa, and the Alamino Creek Preserve, which is southwest of Marfa. There were some good ideas discussed, which we'll talk a little bit about here in one of the next slides. See, so we also participated in 3 USBR Rio Grande, Rio Bravo environmental flows meetings, which was an organization that Jeff Bennett introduced us to, and they've had very, very positive discussions related to environmental flows and other environmental issues in the region, as well as in New Mexico and outside of the region, but overall focused on the Rio Grande watersheds. And so we've got a lot of good ideas from those meetings. We know that they're putting together a list of strategies that they want to focus on. And so, we're very fortunate to be included in that. So I just wanted to thank Jeff for that. There's also some presentations that some of the members in that organization have been performing. And one of those was Samuel Solis, who we had mentioned. We already talked with him privately or in a separate discussion, separate meeting with him. But a couple of those members have had these CCAS presentations, which we've also attended, 2 of those so far. We also had a coordination meeting with Ray Resendez from the Rio Grande COG, who is working on the hazard mitigation plans for the counties that make up the COG. And so far, he's been able to provide 3 recent draft plans for Presidio, Hudspeth, and Brewster. We appreciate that he's been able to give us a glimpse of what those plans are based on their status right now. He's planning on sending us some updated versions, I think, this week of those plans, but we just wanted to get a peek at what they were, because some of the other, before this draft version, they were a little bit older, so we weren't sure which strategies and actions were still relevant and still needed to be done. So he has provided that, and we've taken a look at those, and there could be some FMEs and FMSs that come out of those. We've also been coordinating with public stakeholders on undersized crossings associated. This was something that came out of the public meeting in PECOS. We had a lot of folks from Reeves County there. Y'all can take a look at the attendance list. I don't know if we have that posted online at this time, but we had people there from the Reeves County Bridge Division. We had someone from the city of PECOS there who was familiar with the future development that was happening. And one common theme that came out of that meeting was that there were some issues. They thought that something useful to study would be flood issues related to the railroads and maybe undersized crossings at those railroads, because that tends to divert flood in different flood waters in different directions, and as well as the I-20 TxDOT projects. A lot of the highway is raised. We did learn about some diversions or large drainage structures that were designed by TxDOT that you probably wouldn't see or really be able to know what direction it's diverting it without that local knowledge. So we did learn about a large structure there in the area while we were in our meeting, and I know that Gilbert and Alejandra followed up and went out there in the field to take a look at that big diversion structure. So that was useful as well. But we think a potential FME or FMS that could come out of that is studying where undersized railroad culverts are located, or where the I-20 highway may significantly divert water and cause potential issues. So that was a good idea that some of the folks at the meeting brought up. We're also looking at the 2008 City of Presidio drainage study. That was something that came out of the Presidio meeting. We met with Brad Newton, who's the city manager there, and he was super helpful. He has a lot of different connections, and he did not hesitate for a second to call on somebody if we had a question about a particular issue. He said, "Oh, I know who." For example, we were asking him about that FM 170 road from Presidio to Candelaria, and said, we've got like 250 crossings there. How do we prioritize? What are the worst crossings? He said, "Oh, well, you got to talk to this person down at the bus barn. He drives that every day on the bus route, so he knows what are the worst crossings there and which ones cause him the most issues." We called him up right there, and he kind of talked about 3 of them that he could describe over the phone. But he said that he'd be willing to take a look at a map and circle the ones that he thinks would be the highest priority. So just things like that happened multiple times. He was able to get people to come down there in person and talk with us, like somebody from the emergency management, to tell us what are the critical routes around there, and if they have any issues with certain low water crossings within the city area when responding to emergencies. So we thought it was very productive from that standpoint. But at the same time, he also provided this drainage study from 2008 that he said mostly was all still relevant, that some work had been done since then, but those were still needs. And it was a very helpful study that we obtained hydrologic models of the drainage areas in Presidio, and we saw some proposed projects that they developed back in 2008, and a lot of them have not been completed. So we're taking a look at those right now and seeing, well, which of those projects might still be relevant and get the most houses out of the floodplain, and we're going to consider those as potential FMPs or FMEs / FMSs, depending on the outcome of that analysis. We were also informed about there's a 2020 City of Presidio comprehensive plan, which also has proposed floodplain, flood-related flood mitigation projects. So we'll be comparing some of those projects to the 2008 drainage study and seeing where there might be some overlap and which ones would have the biggest benefits moving forward. Next slide. Any questions about that so far? Some of the coordination that's already happened before we. This is just a big list of ideas. I don't want to go through all of them in detail, but any questions so far about some of the coordination that I just talked about before we kind of jump to this part? All right. One thing I will mention that wasn't on this slide is we did have a meeting with TWDB on, it was February 18th, I believe. Just had it in my notes here. Yeah, the February 18th, we had a technical consultants meeting with Texas Water Development Board where we talked about some of the questions we'd submitted, and one big answer that we got through, and it was later confirmed through email, was that we cannot duplicate, have a project be both an FME and an FMP if we duplicate all components of that project. However, you can break up a project where you have the pump station, for example, as one FMP. If we've got detailed, cost estimates, we know in general what that benefit's going to be. We can have that be an FMP, but if there's also a storm drain system, for example, that needs to be upgraded before that pump station goes in place, and that storm drain system hasn't been designed yet, then that would be an example where part of the same project can be, the storm drain system can be an FME and the pump station can be an FMP, but you can't have the whole project be both an FME and an FMP. So as long as there's no duplication in any portions of the project, you can have that, but it's not really in line with what we had discussed at our last subcommittee 3 meeting, which was having all the projects from the stormwater master plans be both FMPs and FMEs, so that you could apply for funding for both a study or a project, depending on where each project was in the level of design. So that was some good feedback we received from TWDB, and we can go ahead and send out those responses. And I was going to send those to you, Annette. Do you think that's the best way to provide those to the rest of the group? If we send you those and then you provide them to everybody?
Yeah, that'll be fine. I'll do that.
Okay. I think you were actually CC'd on that, so I don't know if we need to send them to you, but you know which email I'm talking about from Richard. I think it was received on the 25th.
That was on Friday, yes. Let's see. So yeah, I'll confirm with you what I have is correct.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, these other ideas are just concepts in the works right now, but we think that they could eventually turn into additional FMEs and FMSs. We had mentioned already the top 10 cities that are flooded based on the mapping that we have. We're refining that mapping, so some of the numbers of houses are being adjusted, but we will have an FME related to that. We talked about some of the we talked about some of the text out projects and studies previously. These top 4 we've kind of discussed, but some of the new ones, from the public meeting in Presidio, we learned a little bit about their new port of entry is recently being opened up, and that is going to, we've done a little bit of research on some of the text out studies related to that, but that could be a new major port of entry for trade. And so there are some very useful studies here, like this Texas-Mexico border transportation master plan and the Presidio Freight and Border Trade Transportation Plan. We think that those will be relevant to include in this in this regional flood plan. We also have been looking at the Doniphan Corridor plan by TxDOT, which has several flood mitigation ponds or detention ponds along Doniphan planned out. And we also talked about the Horizon Boulevard plan that Tony Santana from TxDOT's going to provide to us. So, this is just a list of at this point, the TxDOT studies and projects that we think are relevant and will probably end up as FMEs or FMSs. And some of them, if they're at that level of design, potentially FMPs. PECOS and Rio Grande watersheds, which the study that's expected in April, which I talked about earlier with Sam Solis, that's probably going to be added as an FME. The concept of FloodMar, which was something that came out of these environmental flows meetings with the USBR that Jeff Bennett introduced us to, will probably have an FME related to that. One of the ones I talked about with Jeff Bennett and Philip Boyd, a project in that Mids Ranch area, we were informed that a lot of these arroyos have been sort of connected with these long, small berms, so that the flows get concentrated into a single arroyo that has some sort of tank for collecting water, and a lot of those tanks have become degraded or completely failed, and that just releases a large amount of concentrated water, which could present some significant risk during a flood event. That's north of Marfa and upstream of Marfa. So we talked about potentially removing some of those berms, keeping the arroyos separated, and implementing some brush weirs or filter dams to slow down the water and promote infiltration into the groundwater. So that's something that we'll probably be continuing to coordinate them and flesh out some good language for a particular FME related to that. And then I already mentioned the 2008 City of Presidio drainage study and the comprehensive plan from 2020. We're continuing to look at those and see which of those projects are most appropriate for our plan. We're going to be looking at specific dams that might have the highest risk of overtopping, or which we already mentioned are on the TCEQ's list of hydraulically inadequate dams. So I think Jeff Irvin is planning on following up with some of those landowners and collecting some of the stormwater reports or the dam alternative analysis reports if they've already been determined as hydraulically inadequate. And we'll continue to coordinate with EP Water and El Paso County on some of the projects that have not been prioritized thus far as their top priority, and how do we incorporate those in the plan if we can. Maybe it won't make in this draft plan, but maybe if we can get them in the amendment plan, what's the quickest route to doing that? And lastly, as I mentioned, those hazard mitigation plans that Ray Resendez sent us, they're still in draft form, but there are a lot of good ideas in those. We also know that the El Paso County hazard mitigation plan just came out in 2020. So, that has a lot of still updated and relevant project ideas that we're going to continue to look at and see how those can be incorporated as FMEs or FMSs. Any questions on all those ideas? If you have your hand raised or something, feel free to unmute yourself, but I'm not seeing anything right now, so I'll just jump into the next part. We don't need to go through all of these because we went over these in the last subcommittee 3 meeting, but these are just the changes to the FME and FMS lists that were in the tech memo. We developed a large amount of additional strategies and studies that came out of our workshop that we had with the local stakeholders in El Paso and in Hudspeth County and in IBWC. And this is just giving you a glimpse of how we've added on to our list, and some of them overlapped with previous strategies or studies that we had in our tech memo. So everything you see in red is basically incorporating the studies and strategies that came from our workshop, our subcommittee 3 workshop, into our list that was presented in the first submittal of the tech memo that was due January 7th. Any questions on that? All right, next slide. And so now I just wanted to go over, these next 3 slides are tiers 2, 3, and 4. We talked about in our FMP workshop, which was subcommittee 2, how the first tier of projects, tier 1, which includes 16 projects, we are planning on evaluating all of those as FMPs, and we would like to evaluate as many of these next tier projects, tier 2, as we can get through, but it's unlikely that we'll get through this full list of tier 2 projects, and unlikely we'll get through tier 3 or tier 4 projects. And so right now what we're planning on doing is incorporating those as FMEs and FMSs, most likely FMEs, and they won't require as much evaluation as an FMP would, but they would still be eligible to be included in the regional flood plan, so that if an grant opportunity came up in the future, those entities, those stakeholders could apply for that grant funding in order to study the project and develop the alternatives that would be needed to classify those projects as FMPs in the plan. And if those studies get done and we can then have the information needed to make them an FMP, what would happen is you would amend the plan, and depending on where we are in the process, we'll have to see if we can incorporate it, before the amendment. But if we're already past August, then it might need to go in as an amendment at that point. But are there any objections with, I guess, that approach in general? Is everyone on board with whichever projects we can't evaluate as FMPs based on our remaining time and budget, that they be included as FMEs from the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 FMP projects?
I think that's a very reasonable approach. ACOM was very supportive in some of the projects that our irrigation district is working on. And I think they're in a good middle ground. I know that we're going to have to do some work to get those projects where we want them to be if we want them to become FMPs. But I think this approach is very effective.
Thank you for that feedback. Anyone else have any comments? Any objections to that? And like I said, we're going to continue to coordinate with EP Water on some of the projects that didn't make it in this prioritized list of projects. I think we had 14 prioritized projects from EP Water, and I believe around 20 or 21 from the county. And Gilbert, Saldana, just so you know, we're gonna plan on reaching out to you and having a coordination meeting where we can kind of look at some of those projects that maybe did make it in the top 21, and seeing how many of those are still relevant. There might be some that have already been constructed, or maybe there's some issues with recent development that make those projects no longer necessary. And we'd like to just kind of whittle down those remaining projects and see so that maybe in the draft amendment version of the plan, that if there's a way to incorporate those, or maybe we group them all together as one big FMS. But we'll continue to reach out to you about that and work separately with both of y'all on an approach for those projects that haven't been prioritized by you all yet.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All righty. Last slide. All right, I think that's it. So yeah, that's all I have. I think, Jeff, if you could take it from here, unless there are any questions on FMEs and FMSs. The next part is task 8, which Jeff will talk about.
So who's working the slide deck? Is that you, Brian?
Yes.
So I'm basically going to give basic previews of coming attractions. We're starting up on task 8. I'm going to go briefly through the scope of task 8. And then I'm going to go through each point of the scope, and then we're going to go through what I'm proposing to do is kind of a brainstorming session and seek input on that if we can. So the task includes, so let me make, so this meeting's scheduled to go till noon. This may take another extra 10 minutes. Is that going to be okay, or is that, or I can speed it up and get done by noon?
I can't stay past noon. I have another call.
All right.
Is it by noon your time or by noon and
I'm
Paso
sorry,
time?
by 11 o'clock your time.
Okay.
I was like, oh, wow, that's a little long.
Yeah.
No, I meant 11:10 basically. All right.
I think it's okay. We can reach out to Mr. Bennett to give him an update on what was discussed.
All right, so we developed legislative recommendations, other regulatory admin recommendations, any other recommendations, and recommendations regarding revenue raising opportunities. I'm going to go through each of these briefly just so you know what's in those. So Brian, next slide. So the legislative recommendations deal with floodplain management. That's basically how do you regulate the floodplain, development in the floodplain? How do you regulate when something's identified in the floodplain that's an existing property or future property? Flood mitigation planning, how do we plan for the future? What can be done legislatively to help that? And then implementation, what can be done to help us implement the ideas that come out of the planning? Next one. This is the same three things: floodplain management, flood mitigation planning, and implementation. But now we're talking about regulatory and admin recommendations. So this is basically how do the different entities that are part of the public stakeholders of this process, and that would include the IBWC, it would include the city, the various incorporated cities, it would include the county. What can be done to give them regulatory guidance on how to facilitate these actions, some of which are available currently, and some of which maybe it requires legislative action to enable them. And by admin recommendations, it includes things such as the instituting drainage standards that facilitate the management and the implementation of these ideas. Next one. So any other recommendations? So what this means is if anybody on the regional flood planning group has another idea that they want to put forward that's related to flood mitigation and management goals, then let's get those in there, even if it's not associated with legislation and regulation. Next one. And lastly, dealing with revenue raising opportunities, including this is straight out of the scope of work, including potential new municipal drainage utilities or flood authorities that could fund. It's not only for funding new projects, it's also for funding operation of existing projects and funding of the maintenance of existing projects. So, and it's not only management, but it's also the actual activities, the planning and the operations. Next. So there's added guidance. So we're talking about all of these things at the local level, the regional level, and the state level. So local level would be the cities and the counties and the water districts, and the regional would be the COG and TxDOT districts, and then state level would be basically the whole state, obviously. And one of the things they want are innovative ways of funding flood risk reduction activities. So we're looking for ideas on how we can fund flood risk reduction. It can be a project that's primarily focused on flood, or it could be a project where we simply add flood measures to other projects that are being funded otherwise. So using that as a prompt, think about what can be done to basically tack on flood risk to other reduction, to other projects that are going forward in any case. And then lastly, you can if you have comments on this process we're going through, the TWDB wants to hear about that in the plan also. Next. So this is what I'm thinking, and this is open for discussion, is that this is such an open-ended issue, and it's not tied directly to technical issues, that I suggest that we open this thing up to a broader audience and try to do some brainstorming so that the people that are actually facing the enforcement of regulations, which might include legal staff on these different entities. It might include people who are involved in soliciting grants for the projects from the different entities. That we make a fairly large group, and what we don't want to do is we don't want to create a 10-hour meeting. So we'll do an awful lot of preparation, which I want to discuss, to basically get the input that we want in the meeting prior to the meeting, and then just discuss what each participant has as input in some organized fashion. And try to get through it in something like a half-day workshop. So part one would be to develop recommendations for legislative action in these regional and local admin issues. AECOM would put together a list of what we think the existing, some of the options for tools and powers of interest, might be of interest to the members of the region. And for that, Richard, I might be talking to you a bit about some of your ideas on how to develop that list. I think the TWDB might be a helpful aid in this, since it's going through all the other different regions. Do you think you can help us flesh out the existing set of tools and powers? I think that's being done by all the different regions. You would think we could get that in some grand statewide thing rather than locally, just in terms of the range of things you can do.
Yeah, I'll ask around to see what we can provide to help you guys with that. See what the other regions submitted.
Right, we're looking for ideas. Like you said before, there were going to be these cases where good ideas from elsewhere get shared. This would be a good thing to basically share what's been done before, and not just in this planning, but in the other flood protection planning that the TWDB's done that's not associated with the statewide plan. We just like to have a brainstorming session with the state and just say, these are the issues that have come up as part of your other planning. I think basically tap into the people that have they're in the process of doing this or have done it before. And of course, we've done our own too, but we're trying to broaden our input. But basically have the options done before we get into the meeting and are just discussing what the experience is of this particular group.
Yeah, I'll ask around to see what we can provide you guys. I would say the general direction though would be like focus on your region to identify any regional issues that you guys have, because technically we don't know, none of the other regions have like certified their specific lists until the actual plan has been adopted.
Yeah, I'm not looking for adopting anything. I'm just looking for coming up with a menu which our regional flood planning group members can have, that basically, so a lot of times you're talking to somebody and they may not remember that they have that particular power, or it's nice for them to say, oh, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. No, we can't do that. And just, it'll be the planning group's choice on whether they use the different things or not. But it would be nice to have some statewide, broaden our sources on this particular issue.
I think,
So,
yeah, I think that could be useful for all regions potentially. So I'll look that up to see if that can be developed for all regions' use.
and we've already got some ideas, which I'll discuss briefly, right? Which I can share with you, that can be shared with the other regions. But I think it would be helpful prior to individually dealing with people in this region to have some input from the broader region. So let's go on to the next one. I'm sorry, next page. So part 2 is develop recommendations for facilitating flood mitigation funding. Discuss existing sources of funding for new protection measures. We'll develop a list. We have a list that we currently have, and again, it would be, I'll share that list with Richard and see if Richard has any input from other regions that might be helpful to add to that list. And then once we have that list sort of assembled, then we'll present it to the group. So we want to discuss the existing sources of funding for new protection measures. And what we'll do is we'll send out to the participants that we identify a questionnaire. And then if there's any new tools recommended for aiding future flood mitigation funding, we'll get those annotated as part of the questionnaire. I mean, what would the city like to have? What would the county like to have? What would the irrigation district like to have? What would the COG like to have? You know, get those ideas in on a questionnaire, so we're not taking up time in a joint meeting. And what innovative ways of funding should be investigated and discussed? Get those in there also. And is Jeff Bennett still on the line, or is he gone already? All right, let's go.
No, he had to go. He did say that before he left a chat saying, I was in a meeting with folks about funding distributed natural storage with large scale stream restoration projects. The state revolving fund looks like a fit.
Right. Okay, we'll add that to our list. Next one. So examples of potential points of discussion on legislative and admin related actions. I think given the time, I'm not going to run through these, but these are ideas that came out of the experience. Remember, we had a meeting where people related their experience during the major floods in 2006 and 2020. These are ideas that have come out of those meetings. And they're also ideas that have come up as part of the stormwater planning process with both the city and the county. So these would be prompts that we would discuss with the people that fill out the questionnaire, just some ideas on whether they're relevant or not. Let's go on to the next slide. These again are ideas dealing with flood mitigation project planning. And these are things where we might want to provide guidance to the region or get comments on how to improve multi-agency emergency planning, how to improve coordination between the different relevant agencies when we have a whole lot of agencies involved in either an FME or an FMP. What can we do to streamline that process and get things implemented? What are the things that slow us down, and what can we do to speed them up? What can we do to improve public involvement? We certainly need to solicit ideas on getting more people involved in this process, and what can we do that's innovative. We've tried a lot of different methods, including individual phone calls, and we just need to get more people within the region involved, and we have to be we're willing to listen to ideas on that as part of this workshop. We also need to figure out how to deal with private business, where private business is involved in flood issues. Typical case is the railroads, where their structures may be causing a significant part of the flooding on the upstream side of their crossings. But how do we get them to pay attention and let us work with them in order to get things improved that isn't necessarily one of their business priorities? And then lastly, talk about flood mitigation project implementation, specifically funding. So is that the last slide? No, okay. So one of the things I'd like to talk about, and maybe we could do that in this meeting real briefly at the end, is we have a bunch of cities in this region that have a lot of houses at risk, right? And we're not getting those cities to pay attention. And we've gone to the effort for these shaded cities here. These, in this table on the right-hand side, we have the cities that have, according to our flood maps, at least according to our early flood maps, have, you know, hundreds of properties at risk, of structures at risk. Yet we're not getting these people to attend the meetings, and I think is part of what the state wants to accomplish is to get these people in the tent so that they're included in getting their issues addressed, right? Does anybody have any ideas on what we can do to improve our hit rate? We've tried identifying who the floodplain administrators are. We've tried calling and emailing and getting questionnaires, and we've tried using public media outlets, but we're not getting a big hit rate on getting these entities to respond and become part of the process. And since we've had some success, but we think we can improve it. We'd certainly like to improve it. Does anybody have any ideas on what we can do to get their ideas on this task and on other tasks?
Well, when we had the public meeting up on PECOS, you had some people of the public attend. Since we can't get to the floodplain administrator or other public staff, public employees, why can't we reach out to the residents, and maybe they'll be interested in becoming part of the or being your point of contact, and they may have good ideas that we should also consider. It'll be a way of having ideas, you know, people thinking outside the box and not being involved in the everyday that we're involved in, and they may have pretty good ideas that they can share with us.
So that's an idea. We have their contact information, right? So we could follow up with an email to them and see if they have any ideas of organizations that we can bring into the tent. But those people that attended are largely, and I may be wrong, but Brian, the people who attended were largely in the immediate region of where the meeting was held, right? We had people from PECOS in that county at that meeting, and we had people from Presidio in that county at that meeting. Do we have anybody from, for instance, Del City or Sonora involved in these meetings?
No. Yeah, I mean, it was mostly people from around the area. Like I said, Reeves County had their road and bridge engineer there, and I believe a county commissioner. I'll have to double check the sign up list. And I know the city of Pecos had a development person who was present, and I think an emergency management person from Reeves County. So That was the PECOS meeting, and then in Presidio, it was mostly people like the city manager from Presidio, the city of Presidio, and we did have one resident from Redford, the town of Redford, just outside of Presidio, but yeah, it was mostly locals.
Any other ideas?
We also had Joanna McKenzie from Hudspeth County, so that would be some involvement from Del City, and we have a phone call scheduled with her.
Yeah, so I think Hudspeth, we're making progress with Hudspeth. But I just want the planning group to know that we're not satisfied with the level of participation we're getting throughout the region, and that we're still soliciting ideas, and that may be part of the discussion on this website. And I'd certainly like to try to get at least the counties that we identified with these risk maps as having significant risks, to get them to provide some kind of participation to it.
This is Annette. I think that with those counties identified, maybe what we can do is we can schedule a meeting with them, and I can go out there in person. We can meet with you all virtually, and we can have that first meeting, just discuss what information is needed from them, where it is that we can obtain it. If they don't have it, how it is that we can go about doing that. And then I think once we get over that first initial meeting, then I think the discussion will start flowing.
I think if we can get them in the meeting to understand that there will be material benefits that come out of being part of the process, I think if we can get them in a meeting, I think we'll suddenly start getting progress. So yes, that would be a big help. And I think, Chris, I think you know which of these entities that are highlighted in blue we've had input from, and which one we haven't. Can you send that list to Annette?
Yes, we can do that.
Right. So just if you could use whatever your sources from the COG to figure out how to get a response and get a meeting, that would be a major help.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do before the next meeting is I'm going to try to generate these lists of what we think the current, in some generic sense, what the current powers and tools are that cities and counties and water districts have that affect these three areas of flood mitigation. I'm going to develop those lists, and then we'll develop the questionnaire, and that will also consider, we had some questions on the original questionnaire. We'll review those similar questions on the original questionnaire and come up with a questionnaire that we can have with the stakeholders that we want to include in this initial workshop. If anybody, one of the first things we will do is send out a query to the group on who do you think we should make as participants to this workshop. And again, I want you to think a bit outside of the technical floodplain management staff, but also think of the regulatory staff and the legal staff and the people that put together the grant, so we hear from them what their issues are on what they wish they could do that they currently can't. So that's all I had. Back to you, Chris.
I think that covers the AECOM portion. I think we'll turn it back over to Annette.
Yes, so the remaining items that we have on the agenda are just two, and that's to set the next meeting date. Jalissa did prepare a Microsoft Forms survey to send out, so you all will be getting that today, if you haven't already received it. And it's your availability between the 14th and 18th. I think we all had said we didn't want Friday, but it's in there anyway, just in case. So as soon as we have that, filled out, we can decide on what day the next meeting will be. But it'll be again for flood planning, and it will be between the days of March 14th through the 17th. So that'll be forthcoming. Are there any questions for me for that item? Okay, then I'll turn it over to you for.
So entertain a motion now to adjourn.
So moved.
That's it.
Second.
Now it's Sal.
Sal.
Got it right.
Okay.
Okay, with the first and the second, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Y'all have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.